So here's a really weird idea I had. Let's say they do a collaboration with like Jack Dro. Rather than making a swatch that looks like a Jack Dro, what they do is they take some of the really popular limited editions and then they make a Jack Dro that looks like a swatch. So it's like, rather than being the plastic cheap thing from, 1991, it's that same thing, but like an actual enamel, like a ceramic case, really, really nice. There's a lot of iconic designs and wonderful things there that I think people will be willing to pay for in nice version rather than in cheap version.
Greetings and welcome to this week's aBlogtoWatch Weekly. David, Ariel, how are you both this morning?
I'm between trips. Tomorrow, this time, I will be getting ready to go to Florida. I will be diving with Tudor. And I'm also going to be taking this really crazy iPhone case underwater. It's this like $500 underwater housing. And if all works out well, I will probably get some really awesome underwater wrist shots. So that's the goal. Let's make sure it works out well. Because that's one of the things, like, we all love wrist shots. David has his Lume shot fetish. I have like underwater shot fetish. It's really rare to even have a chance to do it. You know what I mean? It's hard to do. So like I'm super pumped about this, and anyone out there who's played with these cases and knows that taking pictures underwater with your phone is it's a not straightforward process.
So that's what happens if it goes right. If it goes wrong, what happens?
Well, if it goes really wrong, your iPhone is destroyed. If it goes not so wrong, basically just the pictures are bad. I mean, one of the things that's just crazy is the phone basically wants to turn off and you can't really touch it. So this one has like a Bluetooth system which talks to it and an app, and you can't really use the native software. It's like you have to put it on airplane mode. Like there's like all this insane things you need to do just to take your camera phone underwater. To take pictures. So it's not as simple as putting a case. There's like a bunch of weird engineering things you have to think about.
I mean, I remember the original like cameras you would take underwater, the little portable ones, not like SLRs packed in big cases. It was just like a little screw down plastic case, like the way you would in ye olden days taking it underwater, a watch underwater. You just put it in a really big case.
You're right. I mean, there are underwater cameras and things like that. As we know, there are very few of them where you can just, put the camera right up to your watch and take a picture basically with, no minimal focal distance. So if you have any experience with those underwater point and shoots, you know that while you can operate it easier, getting a good wrist shot is another sort of complicated thing, which I'm sure. So there's really, it's one of those like weird camera challenges. It's like go underwater and take a wrist shot. Like it's one of those silly things.
So David, tell us about your Lume shot fetish, as Ariel describes it.
It's just fun, It's
David looks wistfully to his left and up, thinks about all the Lume shots he's made.
Shooting Lume in the dark alone.
Nothing better. Honestly, I still have it in the sense that whenever I walk outside and I know it's charged and I walk into like a staircase or whatever and it's dark, I always check the Lume on my watches every single freaking time. Lume appreciation is like a big thing for me for whatever reason. So it's impossible.
I just taught my son about ultraviolet light and what that can do to it.
Yeah, I need like a rocket launcher size UV light, like that you can just blast the watch with. That's what I want.
Cool.
It's very true though. There is something deeply satisfying about a day Lume shot, just as you go from the sunlight just into a slight bit of shade as you walk through your front door and notice that your watch is shining. It's like it's speaking to you, going, I'm still here. Just remember me. Don't forget. Don't keep using your iWatch. Use me to tell the time.
I can also light up in the dark. No, I would never, ever, ever, ever get a smartwatch to replace my daily watches, honestly. Sometimes I'm tempted to get one for like when riding the bike or whatever, especially now that always on displays are the thing. But yeah, Lume shots all the way.
Well, let's crack on with some discussion. So first up this week, it's been a week of Swatch news, but we're going to start with the old Swatch news. And David, you had trailed this a few weeks ago, but you've had your grinding gears, having second thoughts about not flipping my Moonswatch. And I want to know, has this article got even more full of regret now that the Swatch Blancpain. The Swifty Fathoms, as we're calling it, has now been released.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the real issue I have with the whole thing is that, at the time, flipping a watch was just flat out considered to be bad. I mean, at least in my eyes, it was a dubious thing. It was a lowly thing to do, to cue something, to be given the chance to buy something, and then to flip it for a profit, because this whole exercise was inherently linked to luxury watches and watches that people aspire to own for years, and then they keep for life or whatever. And never, at least since I've been in the hobby, because I heard that Swatch was a hot thing in the 80s, was attached to a plastic watch for a couple $100 that was sell for thousands. So that was a new exercise, and I've at the time felt like it's really not the right thing to do, to sell it or to flip it, because it would just add to the flippers market or whatever else. But now, again, in hindsight, and this is what the article is about, I'm having second thoughts about that.
Ariel, do you own a Moonswatch?
No.
No. So not tempted to buy one, let alone not tempted to flip it if you did have it?
I wouldn't wear it.
I can sell you one for $3,000 if you want.
That's a very generous offer, David. I mean, look, it's a plastic version. It's like the toy version of something that I know the real thing of. Like, if you're already driving a real pickup truck, do you get excited by the Tonka version? Like, not really. So
I don't know about that. I think it's a bit of a stretch. You gotta always get excited about the Tonka version. It's like Lego. Still excited by the Lego.
I don't know.
Bugatti. As well as the one I have in the drive.
The 50 Fathoms one interests me a little bit more. I've had so many plastic watches. I've had swatches. I know exactly what the experience is. The look to me was not enough. Of course, everyone knows like popularity and all that trendy stuff doesn't have any effect on me, so I don't really care. But it wasn't new enough. It was like, okay, if I was just starting out and I never had a lot of Speedmaster experience, I'd be like, okay, but like, I have so much freaking Speedmaster experience, like, I don't need the plastic version too. So for me, it was a very good watch for them, but for me as an enthusiast, like, and again, there's different people on the team that have a totally different opinion. David really loved his, and I was never like, thinking he was wrong, but that's the beauty of this hobby, is that we each have a very personal experience, and while we can all agree it's a cool thing and it was successful, not everybody wants one.
Well, I like it. It was a fun thing to have for the first week, but I've never worn it since. So it's in the box.
That's just because of all the attention you got on Watches and Wonders.
It was hysterical.
Moonswatch on one wrist, $30,000, you'll see Nardan on the other. All anybody wanted to see was the Moonswatch.
Yes, we talked about it at the time. Yeah, I was wearing the super awesome Skeleton X from Ulysse Nardan with an open work movement and a silicone hairspring and all the rest of it. Beautiful, beautiful watch with a carbon gold case, and people were asking about the plastic watch because it had a blue dial, and it was just released actually a day or two before Watches and Wonders, I think. And there was a guy who seriously contemplated that we could maybe somehow strike a deal for his Tiffany dial Oyster Perpetual 36, which is hysterical. It's crazy.
Ariel, have you ever bought a watch or owned a watch that you've regretted not just flipping? Have you ever bought something that actually you could have sold quite quickly, and actually you look back and you go, I really should just have got rid of that because I don't wear it anymore?
I'm sure everyone has those experiences, but we know that, just because vision is 20/20 in hindsight, you have no way of knowing. There's plenty of watches that you buy that you definitely regret or don't regret not selling. So you don't know. I think that if you get enough watches, you'll feel this way once in a while. I think the enduring lesson is buy watches you want to wear.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, I've enjoyed wearing the Moonswatch that I've got, I have to say. It's now looking a bit scratched up, as is the way of it, because fundamentally it's cheap plastic with a very expensive brand on it. And I suppose that leads us neatly into this week's launch. We speculated a little bit last week. What do we think? I'm not going to do a hit miss maybe on the Blancpain 50 Fathoms Swatch, but what do you actually think? Is it what you expected? Better, worse, indifferent?
Interesting. Just for the record, I think it's good to know that it's important to note that the Swatch Blancpain watches are selling from $625 in fact on Chrome 24 that I'm looking at. So that's where the prices start for some of the uglier ones. Relatively, I mean, that's subjective, but for some reason it's the green and orange, the orange and the yellow versions that are selling for this much, and the blue starts at 900. So, which is still ridiculous because it's the same watch, but it costs, like 40% more. So anyway, we are not seeing what we used to see with the Moonswatch, that one day after its launch, it was selling for 2,500, 3,000, however much. It's selling for, still a considerable amount. I mean, $300-$400 to be made on a plastic watch in one day. That's pretty good.
There's our favorite statement: price and request.
Watch. Get out of here. Yeah, it's
I will have to see how I feel at the moment.
It's a cool thing. I think it's relatively close to the original in terms of design, in terms of aesthetics, so to speak. But I can sense, even just from the pictures, all the plasticness of it, which is not a good thing.
I don't remember what brand it was, but about 10 years ago, somebody came out with a yellow cased watch, or it was basically black and yellow, that was very similar to the 50 Fathoms. It was basically meant to be an inexpensive version. It was, I think it cost like $120 or something like that. It's going to take me a little while to remember what it was. But I remember at the time thinking like, oh, cool, a cheap looking 50 Fathoms that's sort of fun and easy to wear. And, at the time, no one thought anything of it or seemed to care. It's interesting how some of these things require other watches to come out first to legitimize or validate the concept before everyone gets excited about it. So the Swatch Omega first had to come out, and that sort of opens up the market to understanding these, because if this one came out first, it could have easily just been like, what the hell is that? And it makes me wonder, and I love your opinion, what was so special about the Omega and Swatch one that allowed this type of, we'll call it a collaboration, even though it's not really because it's in the group, to make sense to consumers?
I mean, yeah.
You know what I mean?
The thing is,
I don't. Do you agree that if they start with a Blancpain, it wouldn't have been that exciting?
So. Unless, I mean, you saw all the cues for the original, you saw all the cues for this one. I don't think most of the people in the queues for these watches heard about these watches through watch media or because they were on the mailing list of Swatch stores. They heard about it from somewhere else. They heard about it from the hype beasts and the GQs and wherever people gather sneaker culture. So I wonder if those media groups had been on the inside and the first one had been Blancpain, I think it maybe would have had a similar reaction. It wouldn't have been as strong, and it would have been even more confusing to the watch media as why on earth are you doing this with? But we would probably all have been saying, why did you not start with the Speedmaster? Why did you start with the 50 Fathoms if they had started with the 50 Fathoms? But it's obviously built up a head of steam that people think they can make a quick buck. I mean, there was videos of people literally coming out of the store. There's one I saw, I think a lot of people have seen it. Guy comes out of the Swatch store with 5 of them and then goes to the guys sitting having their coffee at the for the new one.
This is for the new one?
Having their coffee under their umbrella in the, nice coffee store with their croissant, and the guys going up and selling them straight to them for like $100 more. Basically, they were paying not to have to queue, so it was a really quick return. So it's basically like, here, small child, go and queue for me, and here's £10 for your time, while they sat back and coiffured their espresso of the morning. So it was all a bit weird. So I don't know. I don't know whether they can pull this off again. I assume they'll try. They're going to have to.
I think they're going to have to. How else are they going to get some of these, sleeper luxury brands in the Swatch group moving again? I mean, we know that compared to LVMH and even Richemont, some of Swatch group's higher end brands simply aren't getting the traction that they probably need. So I was joking about this in New York, actually, with people. We're like, what's going to be next? I thought it'd be funny to do the Harry Winston one.
Fake diamonds in it.
Put diamonds in it, right? for women. But, Glasuta Original, sure, why not? Maybe even Longines, Breguet, obviously you could do something. It's Jacques Dro, sure, I don't know if there's going to be a singing bird, but there'll be something.
We as watch guys understand that the 50 Fathoms is an iconic watch. We understand that the Speedmaster is an iconic watch. What other brands within Swatch Group have iconic watches within them that aren't Omega and Blancpain? I mean, the Rado Captain Cook already looks like a Swatch watch in a certain light. Longines, the Hydro Complex,
yes,
maybe?
Definitely.
Tissot, a Tissot T-Touch Swatch. I don't know whether they have to go back to... I wonder whether they're just going to go back to Omega, and they'll just go back to Omega and do the Seamaster next. This is actually just about having a break.
So here's a really weird idea I had. Let's say they do a collaboration with like Jacques Dro. Rather than making a swatch that looks like a Jacques Dro, what they do is they take some of the 1980s and 1990s like really popular limited editions,
right? Okay.
And then they make a Jacques Dro that looks like a swatch. So it's like rather than being the plastic cheap thing from 1991, it's that same thing but like an actual enamel, like a ceramic case, like really really nice. So it's like a complete. So what it does is it says, yes, those original ones are really cheap, but good luck trying to get them. They're collector's items. If you want to enjoy that same thing today, it has to be in luxury version.
Yes.
And that actually increases the value of the original ones in a not awkward way. So I thought that could be an interesting thing because there are some of those classic things. But if you are a watch lover, you know that it's hard to wear a lot of swatches. They're loud. They're really fragile. They're not all loud, but the basic ones with the quartz movements, they tick really loudly. I don't like that. So... there's a lot of iconic designs and wonderful things there that I think people will be willing to pay for in nice version rather than in cheap version.
To paint the drawing that they then made into a into a swatch rather. What was that called? It was the
pig
painted.
That doesn't surprise me.
That picture done as a Breguet or a Jacques Dro or a Harry Winston. No, I think it's interesting. I do think that the next one will be Omega. If you were to have a bet, what would be the next brand to get the...
I really like the
collaboration.
The Hamilton Ventura, but that's not expensive enough in the sense that it starts at like 800 or 900 and goes up to 1500. So that's... But we were just talking about iconic Swatch Group brand watches, and I think that's pretty cool.
I mean, we'll see if they want to do a dress watch. Because if it's a dress watch, I think it's going to be like a Breguet. They could do all kinds of fun things with the hands, the hour numerals. Like they could make a pretty fun looking kind of like dress watch, but I have no idea if it'll look good or feel good in that plasticness and those colors. Look, I think what we know now is the Swatch is asking the same question, and they're experimenting. I would love to see all the prototypes. We probably never will, but wouldn't that be something to see all the different concepts and things that they experiment with?
What's your favorite one of them? Do you have a preference in color? The one in metal.
The one in metal.
The 50 Fathoms I really like is the actual 50 Fathoms. I think they do. I don't know if it's the photos, but they do look much more plasticky.
Yes.
Than the Moonswatches.
Because it's a thicker case.
I know,
plastic
they haven't
looks like
managed
plastic?
that alchemist trick of making plastic actually look like gold and stainless steel and titanium. That's just letting the side down swatch. I don't know.
50 Fathoms started like $6,000 on Chrono 24, which is not that crazy, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, they are a low demand product given how nice they are. The 50 Fathoms is a beautiful design, and these watches really demonstrate that. So I think that Swatch and Blancpain were correct to emphasize this, but let's not pretend that there's this giant market out there for 50 Fathoms. I mean, especially this particular classic look. I mean, like, nerds like us know it, but the mainstream,
good.
Nobody knows
give us your opinions on... It was certainly the most commented article on aBlogtoWatch for a long time.
Yay.
Well over 100 comments. It was very good.
Yeah, good
and
job,
actually,
David.
one of the second most commented articles in the past week or so is also one of David's. This is the hands-on with Fortis. you basically got to go and see a rocket being launched, David. Is that right?
Yes, with watches strapped to it, which was a lot of fun. This was last November. I remember we even recorded. I think I was on location and we recorded a show there.
Yes.
It was a lot of fun, and honestly, I wrote this up 3/4 of a year ago, and to reread my own article because I forgot most of it at this point. I have just dark memories of Esrange and this forest in the middle of Arctic Sweden, but the actual report I thought was kind of fun and to relive the whole thing, and it was a very exciting place and a very exciting journey, and I'm not sure why Fortis took quite so long with the launch of the product itself. But here we are, and it's happening, and it's very cool. And honestly, it's shocking to me that you can buy one of these watches for 8,450 euros. It's not like, if this is an Omega, it would be like 38,000 or 58,000, or just imagine whatever amount you want, because they actually took a risk in the sense that there was absolutely no guarantee whatsoever that these watches would make it back to Earth in one piece. I mean, everyone who was part of this launch and part of this experiment, because there were, I don't know, like a dozen others inside this rocket from different companies and fields of work, they had to understand that the whole thing could blow up into a million pieces right after takeoff, or, just as it returns or whatever. But these freaking watches survived the whole thing. And you can buy one of the 13 ones. So good for Fortis. I think this is a very cool story. It was tremendous effort on their part, human effort as well, because they were locked in there for weeks. And again, the whole thing must have been an absolute, gigantic undertaking for them. But yeah, read my article. It's hands-on with this Fortis SSC space certification test. Cool story.
What did you think of the watch? Do you like it?
I think I like it because it's different. It doesn't want to look like anything else. It looks like somebody who's a watch nerd and a watch enthusiast sat down and was like, this is what I like. And that's exactly the guy who runs Fortis for 5 years now. He's a watch enthusiast. He's part of a 100-year-old family business that's ticking away. And so he had the means to buy Fortis and the opportunity and also the courage to do so. And so he went ahead with it. And I think this watch, again, is very much something that looks like one guy's vision. And whether that aligns with you or not is down to your preferences, really.
It's a weird one because it's kind of like a minimalist chronograph.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel minimalist. Like, it's very, very well done. I'm not sure about the spacing between the lugs and the case. That's the only thing. I think it does look very 70s, jingly jangly, but the watch itself does look really attractive.
There's no jingliness to this watch. It's like a bunker, basically. So once you put it on, it's super solid. It's one of those watches which is one of my favorite types of watches, is that you have to wear it for a long time and you will discover like little details, how things are lining up, why that this and that is not like that, and so on. And I was wearing it for a couple of days there, and even then they had to tell me or point out like little details, like, hey, have you seen this? Have you seen it? And I was like, no, and I'm not sure when I would have noticed that. So a lot of thought has gone into the way that it is done. And if you want one that was not part of the rocket, then it's 5,000 Swiss francs. So it's honestly, I think it's pretty good value. It's a bit chunky in the sense that, it's like thick, but the proportions are all right. I think it's a cool product. It's a good start.
Who was the model rocket enthusiast? That's what I want to know.
I think it's the same guy, probably.
Well, I'm just saying, like, if I looked at the pictures and all this, I'm like, it's not in the sense sort of like a space launch like you'd think from NASA. This looks like the top end of enthusiast rockets. Like, if you were building rockets your entire life and you just basically took it to its logical extent, that seems like what this entire and not Fortis's thing, but this entire rocket program in Sweden, like, that's what it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually kind of a serious thing because it's been going on since the 1980s. It's basically called a MASER, which is a materials science experiment rocket, and it's supported by the European Space Agency. And I think it's the reason for this size is because you can fit still, a number of, so basically you buy sections of this and you can put your experiment in it. Whatever. It's like, okay, I'm checking right now. It says like scientific experiments that will investigate stem cells for diabetes research to particle research that will provide answers about the origin of planets, and durability of wristwatches. It's a whole bunch of things, and I'm not sure. They have launched like 13, 14, 15 of these over the course of years. But as you say, it's not as big as a freaking NASA rocket, but it doesn't have to be either.
Yeah, it seemed cool. The thing looked like it was made out of this kind of like neat metal alloy. It just seemed fun because it was professional enough that it's not a game, it's not a toy.
Yes.
But still kind of like
A
cowboy
hobbyist.
enough that
Yes.
you didn't. Yeah, you know what I mean. You didn't need to have like a giant company behind it. And
Yeah.
it just seemed kind of neat.
Yeah, it's 42 feet tall and it's 2.7 tons, so something like 6,000 pounds. And the flame apparently they said is brighter than the sun, and you know the whole thing is just shoots up with it at a pace that you wouldn't believe, and it's up. And it's
Wow.
really cool to see something go that fast, you know, and that bright. So it's they were not playing around at all. I remember, you know, that there were these warnings. We had to take a safety course before we were allowed on the premises. It was a like online thing weeks before we went there. And they said that smoke and sirens can occur at any time, but most of the time the smoke and the sirens will be perfectly fine. It's like, and I'm like, how do you tell apart whether it's bad smoke or good smoke? I guess you will see people running around or something like that. And they literally said that you don't have to worry if you hear sirens or smoke. And at some point they said like radio silence, and then you were not allowed to use anything that was wireless. I was playing around with the thought of like using my wireless like flash, like trigger that you put on your camera. And technically you could fire the rocket with it. So if there's like a stray signal from something, that could trigger the rocket itself because it's launched with a radio signal.
David's playing Candy Crush in the corner, launching rockets by mistake. Just suppose
Oh
a
my
Breitling
goodness.
emergency would set this thing off then. If you unscrew the Breitling emergency
Yeah,
thing
maybe.
and launch a rocket. There you go.
That would have been a bad day.
Good stuff. Great. Ariel, your thoughts on Fortis as a brand in general? Up and coming, established, more to come, just steady as she goes?
There's a lot of people that have owned Fortis over the years. It's not a new name. They've had a lot of interesting things throughout history. Right now, I think the challenge for them is to decide exactly what part of their personality to emphasize. They're obviously emphasizing this sort of like space thing. Before that, it was cosmonauts, right? But they don't really want to talk about the Russian space program right now.
back
So
the wrong
I can
horse
understand that. They're trying to do something different. They have some, a lot of youthful energy. These are the types of brands that sort of like get us excited. I can't sit there and be like, and predict, yeah, can you come to our rocket launch? Like, that's not something I can predict. I can predict, like, come to our little penthouse and check out our latest luxury creations. Like, that I know. So it keeps us on our toes. It gives us something to talk about. At the end of the day, it just sort of reminds us of this weird merger between timepieces and maybe the hobby we had as a kid of building rockets, shooting rockets, whatever it is. This is what makes our juices flow as male watch lovers. So more of it. It's great.
Let's play a game, but with slightly differently. This is if you like Mega. Guess the price of the Seiko. Mega.
Yes.
So there have been 7 new releases for the 110th anniversary of Presage, Prospect, Astron, basically of Seiko wristwatches. So they've launched a slew of watches. Now, I'm going to confuse myself if I try to do guess the price of 7 Seikos. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to do the old Bruce Forsyth. Nobody other than people in the UK will know what on earth I'm talking about. Play your cards right, where we're going to go higher or lower. So there are 7. Go and check out the article on aBlogtoWatch. There are 7 releases. There is the Presage Craftsman. Okay, make of that what you will. The Presage Sharp Edge. The Dress Style 60s. An Alpinist, a Speed Timer, an Astron, and a Seiko 5. So I'm going to give you one of these watches, and then you're going to tell me whether the next one is higher or lower. So we'll take it in turns. So we'll start off with the Presage Craftsman. I'm going to show the gentleman a picture of this watch, but you've got to try and not look at the price. So here we go. So this is the Seiko Craftsman. Okay, enamelly dial, all the rest of it. This watch is £1,250 or $1,250. This Seiko automatic pressage. I'm going to ask you, there's 1,250. I'm going to ask you, is the Alpinist higher or lower? So the Alpinist, David, have a guess. Is the Alpinist?
Which one's the Alpinist
again? I'm going to find you the Alpinist because this is there we go. That's the Alpinist there. I've displayed it on the screen for these gentlemen. Is this Seiko
lower,
Alpinist
for sure.
higher or lower than $1,250?
It's got to be lower.
I'm going to also go lower because I just can't see somebody spending that much for that weird off-centered other crown.
Okay, the Seiko Alpinist is in fact higher. It is a whole $50 higher at $1,300 over the Craftsman.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
This has its freaking GMT. That's fine. But the other one has a power reserve indicator and a date.
Yeah, so there you
And
go.
an enamel dial.
What can I say?
I thought the Alpinist was their cheap thing. All
Okay,
right,
so there we go. So that's the Alpinist at $1,300. So my question then is...
I was not expecting this to be this hilarious this fast. I thought that you would get at least a few right.
This is going to drag. No. I think this will be okay. I think we'll be okay. So we go from the Alpinist at $1,300 to the Sharp Edge, which I'm now displaying on the screen for the gentleman. This is
called the Sharp Edge now?
The SPB 413. Is this higher or lower than a $1,300 Seiko Alpinist? It has a wee textured dial, automatic 3 days, got a date. Higher or lower?
I'm going to go with lower.
Okay. Lower. It is in fact lower. It is $1,050 for
Okay, let me just be clear. Sharp edges is something we want to avoid on a watch when touching it, right?
It's it feels like something that's maybe been slightly lost in translation. Like it was
when it's like, watch out, there's sharp edges. No one's like, oh, I want to wear it.
Yeah, so that's $1,000. Well, it's at $1,050. Okay, let's take it to the...
What is this entire limited edition of all these watches? Like 10,000 pieces
there's 2,000
or something?
pieces of that one. So yeah, they'll never be
All together.
Yeah, who knows? So let's go to the Seiko Presage Style 60s, the SSK 015. So the previous was $1,050. What is this Presage automatic GMT?
Down, lower.
Is this higher or
Gotta go with
lower
lower.
than the previous Sharp Edge? It's got a GMT, it's got a date, it's got a bezel. Higher or lower? Lower from Ariel?
Yes.
It is indeed lower. It is $620. It's half the price, basically, of the previous one. Okay.
Doesn't have that extra crown, David.
Oh, okay.
That's a $700 crown. Don't you know that?
I guess that explains it.
At least.
Then we are on...
See, that's a lot of crowns.
That's
This is going to go up.
Just when you thought they were...
Oh, boy.
Just when you thought there were no more crowns available, Seiko raided their parts drawer and came up with the Seiko Prospect Speed Timer 1/100th of a second solar chronograph, the SFJ 009.
Yes.
It's probably fair to assume this is going to be higher just because of the number of crowns. You know, they do cost money. But
Oh, yeah.
how much higher than a $625 dress style 60s is this Seiko Speed Timer?
Like at least $500. At least $500
So
more.
double the price?
Yeah,
David,
double.
any
I would
advance?
say double.
Double the
Yeah.
price. It's
Maybe
just
a bit
under
less.
double the price. It's just
Yeah.
$1,050. So if you want bang for your crown buck, this is the way to go.
Technically, this has 1 crown and 3 pushers.
Yeah,
We know. I was just joking because it was like all of a sudden we went from like 2 to 4.
I'm just sure our listeners would be shouting at their podcast device.
Guys,
like,
these aren't crowns! We know, we understand. Thank
I
you.
understand the concept of showing that you can produce a 1/100th of a second timer, but it's simply not possible for a human being
It
to
doesn't
use
matter.
a 1/100th of a second timer. Like, you
Speak
can't.
for yourself, Rick.
So I'm curious as to whether anyone has ever been able to use a 1/100th of a second timer in a way that actually vaguely accurately measures anything. So if there is genuinely some way of using a timer that's any better than 1/10 of a second, I'd love somebody to explain the scientific experimental process on which they managed to make it use.
On the side of the case or the back, all it needs to say is not for human usage.
It's like when they
And then you're solid.
It's like when they changed waterproof to water resistant.
There's the 1/1000th of a second ones that we can talk about as well.
Did Zenith ever come up with that? I remember Zenith producing a case about 4 years ago where they said, yeah, here's the 1/10th, here's an original Zenith not Chronomaster, El Primero, and we've left a space in this case because eventually we're going to produce one that's 1/1000th of the second. I don't think that's ever seen the light of day.
I don't know. Tag Heuer had a bunch of the
Yeah,
weird
they had
ones, and those are some of the most exotic movements I've ever seen. Yeah, I don't know how many of those things actually worked. I remember hearing some stories about some of them like exploding. Well, there's these springs under such crazy pressures, right? Like,
Of course.
I believe all of it, but they had this crazy chronograph Skunksworks program, and we've talked to Guy Simon about it, and he's like hasn't let out that much, but it's very clear that there's a lot of very hilarious moments happening at LVMH during the development of these various chronographs. Someday we'll have to get deeper into those tales.
Some kid has the job of just picking up lots of little springs from the floor after every experiment. Okay, 2 more to go. The Seiko Astron. GPS Soar SSJ019. Yeah, we're still doing this game because there's 2 more left. Is this higher or lower than the $1,050 speed timer Seiko Astron?
Higher.
How much higher do we think it is?
About $800, $900 more.
Very well done. It's $1,900 for a Seiko Astron. And then right down at the bottom, we'll give it its dues because it is cheaper. The Seiko 5 Sports, the SRPK41. This comes in at $425. Now, my question is,
it's one of the most handsome
ones. I
ones.
was going to ask that question. Of all of the ones, is this actually the best one? Is the cheapest of this 110th anniversary run actually the one you would buy? And then compare this to the fact that you could buy this, or you could buy a Swifty Fathoms for basically the same price. Is there any sensible person that goes and buys the plastic watch instead of the Seiko 5?
Well, I'm not sure about
Metal's
sensible.
so yesterday. Don't you know that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a limited edition. This is 6,000 pieces. So, a genuinely limited edition. Anyway,
so we're laughing
God.
because most non-limited edition watches, 6,000 of them aren't actually made.
Yes.
Yes.
But they will actually
That's why
make
we're
6,000 of these, I think. And they will sell them all, I suspect. It's a lovely looking watch. Go and check out the review of the launch of all of these.
I just wanted to add that I was browsing a couple minutes ago, Chrono24, for something that I would rather buy than a $700 flipped Blancpain Swatch. And I found this Citizen Pro Master that has a blackened titanium case, titanium bracelet, Lume the dial, the whole thing. And the watch is still an automatic, so it's not a quartz, and it has a day and the date display as well. So it's all
if you
the
can
watch
fix
you
the
could ever
movement,
need.
I don't want it.
You can throw it out.
fix the
you don't have
movement,
to
I don't
fix
want
it. You can still trash it. Bin the whole thing.
I think the good thing is the message is if your Blancpain and Swatch 50 Fathoms breaks, you just throw it in the ocean. That's the message.
That's the only right way to
Return
get
it to
rid
the
of
sea.